I will call the August 20th meeting of the Planning Commission to order. To go over the agenda, we'll have time for public comment, approved minutes. We will continue working on the update of Jericho's zoning that is being directed by the state's bylaw modernization grant program. We will report on events, other business, wrap up and planning for next meetings. And then we are planning to hold an executive session this evening to discuss personnel matters. And I would like to be able to do that around 8:30 to give us enough time. And then we will adjourn. Does anyone need to make any changes to the agenda? Okay, so not on the agenda, though, I would like to say welcome to Chris Flynn. Thank you very much for providing guidance and direction to the Planning Commission. We are very eager to work with you and make a lot of progress over the next several
Sounds good
weeks.
to me.
Okay, good. And the Planning Commission is looking forward to the town hiring a new town planner. I'd also like to thank Sarah for running meetings in my absence, and I'm happy to be back in person. I was telling Chris Brown, be forewarned, I've got that back to school, just got a new notebook, kind of like, let's, let her rip kind of feeling. So there you have it. All right, so with that, we will invite public comment. Anybody on the Zoom, please use the raise hand feature. We'll hear first from anybody in the room. Mr. Lacey, please come forward. We've got 3 minutes.
Or you'll call me back.
Yes.
I'll welcome that. Chuck Lacey, Jericho Center, 25 miles an hour. I'd like to talk for a minute about wastewater, which you have said, I think Eric and others, if wastewater doesn't move ahead, you're all wasting your time in terms of the Riverside work. When the engineer was here at the beginning of the first week in June, he said he needed 2 months to get to 90%. The select board learned, to no particular disappointment on their part, that won't be done until towards the end of this month, if we're lucky. I've just been looking at some of the other wastewater systems around, and it just doesn't need to take this long. I looked at what they've done in Montgomery, and in 10 months, they commissioned a study, did their cost estimates, identified financing, led in the public, and passed a bond for wastewater. They did it in 10 months. They were, and we're behind where we were in 1997. I have met with public comment with the select board many times about things that they could be working on parallel with this study. One is governance. Is this a district system or a town system? We have the initial cost estimates and could be doing cost modeling right now. We haven't spoken with Underhill yet. We haven't spoken with either of the water departments who might be involved in some administrative way instead of managing the system. We're not out visiting other systems. We're not interviewing engineering firms, which I hope will be a great, incredible opportunity to learn. So I think, and I will say at the 90% completion level, whenever it happens, the select board is committed to you in writing to, within 3 months of receiving the 90% report, establish well-defined next steps regarding municipal wastewater infrastructure for the village centers and or the commercial district, and identify required municipal resources, staffing, and capacity. This is very similar to the deadline in the town plan, which was for the end of December. So the select board has a lot of work to do on wastewater right now. They've chosen to do it during budget season. Nevertheless, it's their decision. They have the capacity to do it. We encourage them to add to their capacity. They said they don't need it. We encourage them to add to the budget for wastewater. They said they don't need it, but they have these commitments. They need to hear from the Planning Commission. As a Planning Commission and as individuals, you have set yourself up to be the manager of accountability things in the town plan. This is the most important thing in the town plan. This is the inflection point. At times, you knew you need to speak up, but you didn't because you wanted to save political capital. This is the time to use whatever political capital you have to really insist. If they're just playing the whole town plan for a chump, if they don't move ahead, I'll say just one last line. For 50 years, our plan has been to reserve most of Jericho for the wealthy and to put people with modest incomes in a tiny area, and we'll do wastewater to make it happen. What people in the luxury zones have learned is they can keep their 10-acre lots, they can keep their luxury housing, as long as they promise wastewater, they don't actually have to deliver it.
Okay.
And let's not let them get away with that again.
Anybody online? Sabina, anybody raising their hand online?
We don't have anyone from the public online tonight, at least not yet.
Okay, very good. So the next order of business is to approve the minutes of August 6th. Do I have a motion to approve?
I'll move to approve.
All right, thank you. Second. Sarah, thank you. Any edits or corrections or clarifications on the minutes? Okay, vote to approve. All those in favor of approving the minutes, say aye. Aye. Anybody opposed?
Aye.
That was an aye approved, not an aye opposed, right? Yes, okay, thank you, Heidi. There was a little delay there.
Because it's unanimous.
Pardon?
It's unanimous besides, yeah.
Yes. Okay, so then our next topic is to continue our work on the zoning updates. So we will proceed. How do you want to proceed, Chris?
Well, you were talking how you want to pull up the presentation, start with that Whitey provided, or excuse me, David White. I know David, he and I are old college roommates. If I refer to him as Whitey, it's just because that's, I've known him that way for a long time.
Yes.
You want to pull up certain sheets on that to, I guess, begin the conversation? I mean, otherwise we did jump into the red line.
Yeah.
And we've gotten comments from Wendy and Eric and you, and I've sort of bullet hole responses or things back to people.
Okay.
So you want to, so.
Yeah, so I think if we could start with those couple of slides.
Yep. Sabina, I assume I can get those slides and I can share them, or is that correct?
Yes, you can share.
Okay, thank you.
So my suggestion about how we proceed here tonight is that I think when David presented the changes last time.
I'm gonna just interrupt. Sabina, can you see that or
No.
no?
We
Okay,
don't
hold
see
on.
screen sharing.
There we go.
Okay, that's better.
Okay.
We spent most of the meeting in presentation mode. So tonight I wanted to give the planning commission more opportunity to actually discuss the changes that David had recommended. And I thought that one way we could go about doing that was to look at the really like high level, big picture changes and make sure or see if the planning commission agrees with his recommendations. Because if we don't agree with his recommendations, then some of the red line is sort of moot. Then we would have to go back a little bit to the drawing board. So I wanted to get a baseline understanding of how people reacted to the recommendations. And then I thought we could go through the red line, which is sort of agonizing, but in order to be deliberative, but also efficient, if we could go through it kind of section by section and maybe hear from people questions or concerns that they have, focusing on the things that you think are important to discuss as a group. If things are changes that are sort of grammar or could be phrased better, I think those kinds of comments can be delivered individually. We can compile them and deliver it to David. We don't need to take our time tonight. Hopefully we'll get through it all. But we'll see how far we get. So I thought the first thing that I found most helpful, or one of the things most helpful that David presented, were these definitions, because his changes are really in these various categories. And he was saying, you know, we're getting changes in 2 tranches, as somebody said. And this first tranche was sort of kind of process driven. And the tranche we haven't seen yet is some of the more substantive changes. So he was helping us differentiate between site plan review, boundary line adjustment, subdivision, land unit development, and conditional use. And he has pretty significant changes about how each of those things should be reviewed, who has the authority to review them, and what criteria they're reviewed against. Okay, so did everybody like these definitions, appreciate any questions about them, especially because we have Chris, who, as you know, is the zoning administrator and works with the DRB. He's got the real world experience of interpreting the standards against real world applications. So when we have things like, well, what would be the consequences of this? I'm looking forward to hearing Chris's guidance on, well, this is what the consequence of that would be. Does anybody have any questions or comments about these basic definitions? Everybody's clear. Okay. So then the next one.
I was gonna say, these are all specific uses and reviews that get administrated through the zoning rules and regulations. And if there are any specific questions on the function of them, let me know. Otherwise, you know, what David's thrown out there pretty much covers it. So.
These are standard definitions, though. This is not.
Yes, this is true in most towns, all towns.
These aren't definitions. These are actual review. These are situations for review of applications. Applications are reviewed these ways. What's below them are descriptions of what they are. So, if that helps.
Does that help? Yeah, okay.
Then you
All
want.
right, we'll go to the next one.
Site plan review. This one.
So this is his suggestion. Currently, site plan applies to applications, and the DRB conducts site plan review. And one of our goals was to kind of grease the skids, make it easier to develop. And that's one of the benefits of the form-based code, is that we remove discretion. You make it very black and white. If you meet these criteria, you get it approved. And David's recommendation is that for certain applications that we create, which is not currently a concept in our zoning, we create this new concept of a minor site plan and a major site plan, and that we separate applications into these 2 buckets. And this is the basic criteria that he's suggesting, so that the zoning administrator would be able to receive and adjudicate applications within the village center that meet these criteria. Create a new structure or expand as long as the whole thing is less than 10,000 square feet, involves the creation of 4 or fewer lots, and does not involve the creation of a public street or a conditional use. And then a major site plan is basically the opposite of that.
So the minor site plan review, does that include or also mean that the zoning administrator will be reviewing form-based code issues for Riverside?
Go back to the definition,
The answer is yes.
please.
It would have to mean that, because
Right, so it's the physical layout and development of a property.
So site plan review primarily deals with circulation, parking, landscaping, lighting, things along those lines
Right.
as it stands now. What's being proposed in the change, what the major really changes here are the creation of lots. Right now, that's a subdivision, so they get created, they go to the DRB.
But since you are conveniently in our meeting, are you okay reviewing applications relative to the form-based code?
Well, I do right now. So,
Okay.
yeah,
First, I just want to say it's a serendipitous gift that you're here to do this conversation with us, so
Yeah.
thanks for that. So are you comfortable with this new direction of making two separate work streams that puts you
What I-
more in the decision-making capacity, outward facing to all the people who apply versus having more of the conversations in the DRB?
for me personally, yes, I am comfortable with it. I got 30 years of experience,
Right.
both in the private and the public end. And I think with regards to creating these expanded authority, you want to define, have a great definition as to what a subdivision is, as to what a lot is, things along those lines. It clearly starts defining what the people are asking for. And so that needs to be in place. The remaining things on the minor site plan are virtually kind of the same. And they exist in all the zoning districts, not in just the village center district currently. So I don't see it as a big change. What is a change is basically the creation of lots, which basically need to meet certain state standards, other rules that are applicable for creating new lots. You're giving the zoning administrator the ability to approve those administratively up to 4 lots. I don't see it as a huge problem. You don't have a whole, I mean, it's not like I'm making anything up. You're reacting to an application.
So so that brings me to my next question. You, with your experience, are comfortable. Do you feel that the changes that have been presented would be manageable for someone if you win the lottery tomorrow and retire to Fiji?
I did get a ticket today.
Right, but is it reasonable to think if you're not the person doing this job, that it would be straightforward for a person that is hired into that role to perform their job without confusion?
I think that is possible. With regards to creating, basically the definition of what these things are and the uses are. And that basically sort of frames what you're looking at, so you don't stray.
Right.
And I think that's important. So usually anytime I get anything, you tell me this is what I want to do, I go look for a definition. We don't have a definition, I gotta go to Webster's. So that's the way that works. I don't see it as a huge problem. I find it interesting that giving a zoning administrator the ability to approve the creation of lots. I mean, I haven't really heard of that before, but it's not, scary.
That's what I was curious about, if other towns were using this model. I had two questions. One, has this proved out to be successful in other places? And the other, have we talked to the DRB about it? Just to see what their perspective was.
You haven't talked to the DRB. I'm not sure they would really care.
I just think it's kind of just, if we're changing process, a process that they've been involved in, I think it would be courteous, and also I'm curious about their perspective.
Question I have is 10,000 square feet.
Mhm.
Why anything under 10,000 square feet? Why not 5,000? 10,000 square feet is a relatively large building for Jericho.
Mhm.
Two things. One, I would hate for someone to say you just picked a number out of a hat and it's arbitrary and capricious, so we don't have to worry about it. Two, I would be very disappointed if we had 3 10,000 square foot buildings devoted to warehouse space going next to each other, none of which get through any kind of review. So what is the reason for it, and
Well, since this is my maiden voyage today, I can't give you an answer. I think 10,000 square feet, is just a nice round number.
It's in the zoning regulations now.
Yeah, it's in the existing regulations, but I have a similar question to Eric's, which is that this language creates a new structure or an expansion, I think is a little bit, I don't know, old fashioned isn't the right word, but we're hoping for creative projects that might be 2 or 3 structures on a lot potentially. So I wondered if the text really needed to say creates
So here's
a new structure or structures, or as an expansion to existing structure or structure, like it's the whole thing. But, so that's where
Yeah.
I think when you say, sure, a zoning administrator could do it when it's black and white, but I think we can't think of every possibility, but we do have to think about things that are likely. And I think it's likely, if we play our cards right, that we will get applications that are more than one building on a lot. Especially because other changes that we're considering is to enable that.
Well, yeah, I mean, the only way you're really gonna get multiple buildings on one lot are probably gonna be through the PUD process. So,
So then that would not be administered by the zoning administrator anyway.
right,
But even so, the text doesn't clearly say that. So that would be my feedback to David, is that it should be clear that if the whole site plan is the site plan, and if there's a sense of scale as being one of the thresholds to consider, it should be the scale of all the structure, not just one structure.
well, it would be because it'd be part of the application. So site plan review is a nature of review for an applications that come in. And they're usually for everything that is a permitted use. So basically you said, this is the use that we want to have happen in this area. So it needs to be on, whether it's a 3-acre lot or 1-acre lot, quarter-acre lot, whatever it may be. And if it's a permitted use, then it goes through a site plan review. And what this is saying that basically is a new structure up to 10,000, I mean, under 10,000 or in addition to a structure, under 10,000 can be reviewed by the zoning administrator under site plan review. If it's above that, it's gonna probably have a site plan review. That's gonna need to go to the DRB. And they're gonna look at, it's gonna have the same review. It's just gonna be at a public hearing.
I don't want to get too far into the weeds on this, I think we're trying not
Yeah,
to.
but
My other concern about it is, it says totaling less than 10,000 feet, gross square feet. If I've got a 9,000 square foot building,
Right.
and I pop on a 10,000 square foot addition to it, which this allows. I'm at 19,000 square feet now, and that, again, is that the intention?
I think
Well,
his
it says
intention is
totaling.
totaling, and I think we have to look at the actual language, because
Yeah.
this is just a summary. But I think his intention is not to go to 19, but to have the total be.
So, yeah, it would
Is
be-
it being-
well, so the threshold levels,
Yeah,
the threshold level, I mean, when I look at this and read this, is you can build a new building, 10,000 or lower.
Yeah.
Or you can add on to an existing structure to make sure that the total structure is 10,000 or lower, and the zoning administrator would review it. If you don't like 10,000 square feet and you're comfortable with 5, or you're comfortable with 6, or comfortable with 7, that's fine. But I mean, so what this is, all this really is gonna be an industrial type building, or, a larger,
Larger retail.
yeah.
That
And
could
so,
be an apartment building.
Yeah, it would be an apartment building.
We hope it's an apartment.
well,
building.
that'll probably, but then well, that's true, but it's probably not gonna receive, it really depends on what you're allowing on that lot for number of units and density and those types of things are gonna sort of
But
dictate.
that's not the criteria. What you just mentioned is not.
No, but it's part of the whole component. There's so many pieces to the puzzle for an application and the review. And this is just one nature of the review. So there's other parts and pieces that get involved in this. There's what's the zoning district? What's the allowed, capacity? What's the allowed density? What, do
Right.
they, do they have enough, room for parking and circulation and all those
So one
types
of
of
the
things?
things David explained to us is that his goal was he was trying to tease those apart.
Mhm.
So that each one could be separate, they could be simultaneous,
Mhm.
but they could be separated.
Mhm.
And so you're bringing up a different point, which is what happens in a review when one part of the review, like site plan, goes to the ZA, but another part of the review would go to the DRB, then overall that would go to the DRB. But I think what he was trying to describe was that the zoning as long as it meets these criteria, that you should be able to look at the use table and if
Yeah.
it's a permitted use and
Yeah.
look at the district and all those other things.
Yeah.
I mean, the zoning administrator,
Yeah,
not you, but.
Yeah.
Sabina had her hand up for a few minutes. Sabina,
I just have a clarifying question. Is it so between the first bullet point and the second bullet point, is the and or implied there, or do the first and second bullet points, are they both happening? Or is it understood that and or is also in that between the first and second?
I made a comment about that and asked him to clarify, but my reading of it is that it should have been and or also.
Well, they're all separate bullet points. And that's my take.
Right, it doesn't have to be all those things, it could be any of those
Right,
things.
those are all deal breakers.
Right, and I also thought the creation of four or fewer lots is governed by the subdivision rules, so it didn't make sense to me that this is part of a site review criteria list.
But if you look at the subject,
Let's just decide who's in charge.
if you look at the
Right.
subdivision, if you look at the subdivision rules proposed, basically, they're proposing that minor subdivisions, 4 lots or less. So if you're having a minor subdivision, that's gonna fall into the site plan. It's gonna fall into the ZA's hands with regards to this. And in a subdivision review, you're gonna end up having all the site plan criteria is involved, all the general development criteria is involved. Depending on the nature of the use, you may have conditional use involved.
Right, so
You're
we're gonna
referring to-
look at subdivision next, that was the next slide.
Right.
So then this should really say, not involves the creation of 4 or fewer lots, it should really say involves a minor subdivision.
You're splitting hairs here, in my
Yeah.
opinion.
Yeah.
So,
But we're at the sort of rubber meets the road, we're trying to be precise.
well, automatically, if you're creating a lot, it's subdivision, so you need to go to that section of the regulations anyhow.
Okay.
So, and there was one question or point. Yeah.
Yes, but I want the language to be exact.
It's gotta be easy to read and simple. Yeah,
Right.
So,
Right,
there was one, question with regards to, having multiple lots and things. So we've got, the Tetro property has received the total subdivision for the whole lot, the whole 15 acres. They've gotten site plan review for the first 19 lots. So currently, right now, is if he had uses that he wanted to put on those lots, more than likely, I would be reviewing them under the current regulations. It wouldn't be going to the DRB.
yeah,
So those
Because
things,
that's like the zoning.
so those things are in play. Yeah, that's for the allowance of that. That will happen at some point when he gets his remaining approvals from the state and things, but now at that point, that's the whole intent was that it doesn't go to another public hearing. It doesn't get an additional review. And you're tweaking certain aspects of those form-based code regulations, which, will make development easier,
Mhm, right.
or simpler,
Yeah.
less layers to review.
Yeah.
So,
Okay, so Wendy, you'd like to know more about this if other people have done this before?
Yeah.
But in principle, do you think it makes sense as a way of facilitating, making development easier, cheaper, faster, more reliable?
I'm with Eric questioning the 10,000 marker. I'd like to understand that better.
And does it seem just your gut, like too big or
Yeah,
too
it feels a
small?
little bit.
Big,
Yeah.
okay. there's other parts of the regulations that have things greater or not of 3,000 square feet, like retail and what's conditional use, so that might be. Heidi? Are you in support of this concept of a minor site plan and a major site plan?
To the extent that I am understanding it, I like what it's trying to do. I am struggling still to understand the implications of what the change means from what the current practice is. But I appreciate all the probing that my fellow planning commission members have asked.
I think the major change is what Chris just mentioned, that a minor site plan review is an office visit here to the town hall. You fill out some papers, Chris advises the applicant, and the project, you still have to inform abutters, your neighbors, about the project, right? Or no?
No, I will not receive a public hearing. I mean, the nature of the plans and the submission is going to the DRB, and the zoning administrator will probably be on the same level. But there's no public hearing. There's no need to notice
Still,
that.
there's no public hearing, but you don't have to have you don't get a letter of notice to your neighbor.
There's no public hearing. I do not notify the neighbors. What's provided to the applicant is they get the yellow card with the red Z that gets placed publicly. So that informs the public that a zoning permit has been pulled. They got 14 days to question the issuance of that permit. They can appeal that permit. They can ask for a stay, and the project goes on hold. The DRB will review it. The reality is I'm probably not going to approve something I can't approve.
Right.
So
Right.
it should be approvable. So will it be appealed? Not necessarily. The other thing I just want to point out to everybody, down at the bottom, the last bullet point, it says doesn't involve the creation of a public street. Well, we don't make public streets anymore. We make private streets. So.
But
we might.
we might, and
All right, I'm just,
we don't all agree with that policy.
Right.
so-
yeah, I've been here 9 years. We haven't made one public street. So I'm just saying, what this is saying, that if I come in and I want to do development that's going to create, that has a private street, not a conditional use, that may not fall within the other bullet points, I get to approve it. So if you're good with that, that's fine.
So I didn't get the nuance that abutters would not be notified. So if we as a commission choose
No.
to go that way, that has to be a big part of public outreach, that people are aware of that change in the hearing. I think that's important for people to understand if we choose to have that.
And the reason I said no, by state statute, the zoning administrator, we have statutory rules that we need to follow. So the state says, here's how you do these things, and here's what the public is afforded for consideration or review. And it's and you can't make a more restrictive rule above a state rule. So that, so notifying them by mail or things along those lines, probably wouldn't fly.
Is that more restrictive?
It doesn't happen now, right?
Doesn't happen now.
No, you get the red Z.
Yeah.
You get the red Z, but these projects without this go to the DRB, which does have a public notice and does inform.
So out of these lists here, what goes to the DRB is the creation of lots, the conditional use, right? If it's a structure under 10,000 square feet and it's a permitted use on a lot that meets all the setbacks, I would have the authority to approve it.
You would approve the use, but would you approve the site plan?
I would review it under site plan criteria and approve it, yes.
Okay.
So the really, I mean, the biggest differences there are the creation of the lots.
I think it's an important distinction though, Wendy, that you're raising, because the rules are the rules, and what is the town, think about the rules, the select board adopts the rules, and those are the rules that as the community you all sort of agree to live by. And one of the things that we heard through the process and through like the zoning for better neighborhoods is that the upset of neighbors, which is often unfounded in the rules causes delays, even if they lose or people don't want to make other people upset. So developers often will just go someplace where it's easier or it's more black and white. So I guess I can see, that's why I thought that abutters at least would be informed. So I had a similar reservation, but thinking it through, you know, if we're trying to remove an obstacle.
It's a cheap
Then-
date to appeal.
We don't want the neighbors necessarily to be in charge of deciding what is or isn't great. We want the rules to be deciding what is or isn't great.
Yeah, and
But
I,
it's dicey, you know, because this road is coming past somebody else's driveway and.
yeah, I guess my bigger point was that if we're endorsing this, I don't want to hide it. I want to make sure that people understand that the change and the impact.
Well, you will hold 2 public hearings. The select board will hold a public hearing. The information will be out. It'll be incumbent upon the public if they're that interested to review and be involved. And if they don't, and it passes, then they'll live with what the rules are, just like they do today. So
It's also not technically true that the abutters aren't notified, because posting, the requirement to post the red Z on the
Yes,
yellow sign is a notification.
yes.
And
And that's
if
how
you're
I.
an
It
abutter-
may not be easy to see.
Well, it's.
The
No,
public
it's
is supposed to be able to see
required.
it.
You have to be able to
It's
see it.
required that it's easy to see.
Yeah,
And we're talking about the village center district where technically you don't have longer driveways but I think that would be a good way to, when we do go to the hearings, to make sure that we're comparing and contrasting, this is the way it is now, that notice
Yes,
would be one of the characteristics that would be. that would be
Okay.
different.
So Chris, did you say 9 years you've been here?
Yeah.
Okay, so empirically speaking, if you were, without going through every approval you've ever done in 9 years, empirically speaking, would you say that moving things into these 2 streams of approval makes what percent of the things you've approved in 9 years be an administrative review as opposed to a review board review? Percent?
I would say probably definitely less than 20%.
Yeah.
Maybe close to 15. I mean, we do get subdivisions, like we got subdivision for the fire department. It's a 2-lot subdivision.
Right.
That's going to the DRB.
the past is though not necessarily an indication of the future.
No, but I just want to qualify 2 things. The first thing is that the past isn't always an indicator of the future. Specifically to this, because we are looking to do more infill development in the village centers, and this does focus on the village centers. And we are trying to remove barriers to doing that infill development, and we are trying to add wastewater and other municipal services in the village centers to enable development. So that is the area that we want to focus more on, making it easier and faster to finish the review process, because right now, the things that happen through the DRB take months. And that is a problem for developers. It is a problem. And we have, if you have time to listen to some of those meetings, sometimes people go and start doing things on their site. And then because the process is so long, and the next time their review comes up, they've already done something that they may have to undo. So
That's a rarity. It seems to be isolated to an individual.
it does, but speaking about just trying to make the path, what did you say, grease the skids, whatever expression you use, trying to really smooth that path. If we take the things on the left, that aligns with what we're saying, and again, the red Z is really important.
Right.
And the public does notice the red Z, and people in neighborhoods where they see the Z, whether it's rural or village center, they do call and find out what the Z is for. And that, and there are very specific rules in the state about how busy must be posted, so that it's visible.
So the existing process right now is we have sketch plan review, which is an informal hearing. It's not required, but it's recommended. And then for a minor, you usually come in for, basically your final. And you're gonna have very few developers that are probably gonna be coming in that are gonna be, well, you never know. I mean, you could have a 2 acre lot and you could basically have the village center district, I could, carve off an acre and create 4 lots. In that infill, but the intent there, the only thing that I see that they're missing out on is a potential sketch, which basically, floats a trial balloon, so it says, okay, we'll make sure you have this information. Well, will that happen? Will somebody come in and just give me an application? Well, I'm gonna review it, and if it's not up to snuff, I'm gonna say you need to give me this information for me to be able to administratively approve it, just like anybody who wants to build a house. Or, okay, you want to put up a shed, okay, well, what's the size of the shed? Where's the setbacks? Where are these things? Give me the information, I don't have it, you don't get your permit. So, that's how that sort of works. So it's interesting, it's an interesting concept. And I don't see it, there's state rules with regards to subdivisions and things like that, so I think there's some checks and balances. I think if you end up creating a definition as this is a lot, this is a subdivision, so basically you've got directives for anybody in the future who's looking at what's being requested.
So I guess if the assumption is that we think we could make this work and that we think it's going to meet the goal of making it easier, I guess I would ask if you had other ideas, of what would make it, you think, a better fit for Jericho. So one issue is 10,000 square feet the right number? I threw out at the last meeting, if there was an overlay involved, especially the natural resources overlay, that probably should not be administered as a minor site plan.
Some of those, when you are in an overlay or potentially impacting an overlay, automatically kick it to the DRB
Right
now.
Yeah.
But so I'm sure we can
I
come up
wanted
with.
to make sure that it was written to do that. And so David already knows that he was going to consider it. The other thing I was thinking about is, since housing is a big driver, and Eric, you just brought up the example of like 3 warehouses, another criteria could be involves only residential uses or involve residential as the primary uses. And then other activities like retail or other commercial that would maybe have more public traffic and so forth would be relegated to the DRB. I don't know what people think about that. So I guess the question is, if we agree with the concept, are there other ways of slicing and dicing those applications? Wait before you go. I just want everybody to think about that question.
I believe that the developer will come with the plan that shows what they believe is the highest and best use for the property that they own, and they are not going to read it and say major, minor, don't care, I'm gonna build what I think goes on this lot. I honestly don't think that us making housing part of this one column or the other is going to matter at all. Okay. A developer wants to get the most money from their investment, and they usually have an idea of what they're going to build there when they buy it. So I just think that's not.
Yeah, I don't think it should be excluded to just housing.
Yeah.
I think that the use category is, addressed in another chart. And I don't think that belongs here.
Yeah.
I think that having retail in Riverside would also be nice, and it'd be even best if there was residential above retail, but.
Right, which it would be. It's just a matter of who has the authority and what process does it go through to review.
The only thing I would add is I'm not sure 10,000 feet is right either. It's big.
Okay.
I don't know how we pick a number, but.
I would say that if we make the aggregate of the new building 10,000, but it has multiple tenants, in other words, different entryways, then it won't feel like a 10,000 square foot building. And
Well,
that
I'm
might be a
I'm
way
not
to
concerned about how it, I think you could I don't think that's too big to be in Riverside at all. I'm just not sure if it's too big to be done as a minor site plan review, that's all. But I don't have any problem with the big building there.
How big is the Jericho market? You know, we saw that before. Is that 5,000, 6,000?
Bigger than that.
Bigger than that.
Bigger than that, it's not 10.
12, 14.
I don't know. I
You
mean,
can find that out, yeah,
Mhm.
it's not, it's literally just which column does it go in, not whether or not it gets approved.
Yeah.
Okay, Chris.
so
you were
the point
gonna
out,
say something.
the point I was gonna make is that basically, if you have concerns about that is then dedicate it to the uses, okay? These types of uses, retail over 10,000 square feet is a conditional use, or, so you can leave the structure size, but you say this type of use. So when I look at, uses, it's, 3,000 or under could be a permitted. Greater than 3,000 we have currently is going to be conditional use, so it gets kicked to the DRB. So that's one way to give your checks and balances when you have the use tables, you can sort of say, okay, well, I like this use, but I wanted to have further review if it's this size.
Right.
Mhm.
And actually, I don't know that David was thinking that through or what his plan is for the uses table, but you're right, those
Yeah.
should be this should be in sync with whatever the.
What else to match, yeah. I talked with David today and he's getting ready to release the use table the next day or two.
Yeah.
He says,
Okay, so we gotta
yeah.
get done with this.
Yeah.
'Cause he's gonna,
yeah,
okay, all right, so,
I think, Chris, your reaction on the 10,000 square foot by linking it to the uses removes my objection to it.
yeah. So you can just do it that way.
okay, so when we actually then look at the red line, hopefully that would be quicker because now we've had this conversation. So my takeaway is everybody's good with, we have reservations, we have questions for David, but the idea of creating this concept, we're gonna go forward with.
The questions that I'm going to present to David are, do other communities do the creation of 4 lots or greater, and how does that work? I mean, we've sort of answered the 10,000 square foot question, so I'm not going to ask him. All right.
Okay, then the next one was
Subdivision
subdivision review, kind
yeah.
of similar conversation. Oh, actually, sorry, can we go back one more?
You want to go to this one?
No, the one we were just on.
Yep.
The other distinction that we didn't talk about was the district. So if it's not in the village center district, it still goes to the DRB for site plan review that currently goes to the DRB.
I think that's a mistake. Make
Tell
it,
me more.
make it townwide. Don't just carve off one little island.
Yeah, I agree.
Then I think it's more important to have the NRO, what you were saying, Susan, that if it's, if there's an NRO in that, it goes as a major.
Yep, and I was also, I was kind of splitting the difference, and I was kind of thinking if it's, provided it's not open space district, and provided it's not
Yeah.
forestry district.
There's 0, okay, open space district, nothing can go in it.
I
Yeah,
know.
yeah.
Right, so technically it should be carved out. That it would be all the districts except forestry, open space, and then whichever overlays we think qualify, and who's gonna think about it.
That would still be covered under the table. of uses.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's in the table of uses, so you don't need to exclude something because you can't actually apply for it because it's not allowed. Ever.
Okay, but what about the forestry district, which allows a lot of things?
Well, just make everything conditional use in the forestry. And you can't get anything
Then it goes
permitted
to the DRB.
administratively. It goes automatically, goes to DRB.
I don't know.
So I'll give you an example, the open space, right? We got the highway garage, we're gonna build a new highway garage, it's in the open space. So you guys are gonna change the use table to allow municipal facilities in the open space. And that'll be consistent with like at the range, that's open space. Those are all federal municipal, uses, so that's how we correct that.
So I guess I'm more concerned about forestry than open space, not more because we don't know, who your successor is going to be. And there's a lot of concern about fragmentation and the forest blocks and all those other things. And I think until you are, you can always change it to apply to more districts in the future. I think it's a lot harder to reduce it in the future, and David's suggestion is that it's only in the village center district.
Sabina, I'm curious if what your perspective is.
I think it makes sense to, for now, like what Susan is saying, for now to keep it within the village center, and then we can always expand if we need to, but I I feel like this project was, I think, sold to us as a village center project. And now we're making all kinds of decisions that affect, that could potentially affect other districts without giving that the same level of consideration that we're giving this. So I think it's just too early in our process to do something that's going to have an impact on that scale, because we haven't really looked into it, right? So if once we do that, and if we decide that this minor site plan would be okay, you know, like Susan said, we can make an amendment, but that's my thought is
So
we're sweeping, we're making these sweeping changes without giving both sides of the coin the same level of scrutiny.
currently in the forest district, what's permitted that I can permit right now? Single family house, accessory dwelling,
60,000 square feet,
what's that?
up to 60,000 square feet.
Yep,
So
Yep.
you've already decided a single family home of 60,000 square feet is okay.
yeah, we had somebody apply for a 34,000 square foot house, so.
Okay, can you go on, Chris?
So the is a single family dwelling, accessory dwelling, residential group home, farmer's market, daycare, and accessory structures, which are sheds, garages, things along those
But
lines.
not multi-family. So
Wait, I'm sorry, this like,
I think what?
Yeah.
2 units?
oh, I'm sorry, duplexes are also allowed.
That's it. So I agree with Sabina that the discussion of anything outside the village center is out of scope for this bylaw modernization grant. And at the same time, the current zoning of what's allowed in the forestry district is silly. Those are my feelings.
Is what?
Silly. And unhelpful.
I mean, I'm assuming David's gonna come back with an adjustment to the table of uses that will expand housing types in other districts. And so maybe we reserve the thought about this particular, should this apply in all districts or just this one district or whatever, until we kind of shake out how the table of uses goes.
That's fine.
Yeah. Okay, so now can we go on to subdivision?
Yep.
Thank you for going back, Chris.
So what I tell the DRB every time is that every decision you make, you need to be able to defend it and support it. So same goes for you guys.
Yeah.
So, you know, so that's,
Yeah.
if you can't, then you don't. So,
Yeah. I mean, yes. Okay, so actually not this slide, the next one that had, I thought this one was a little confusing.
this one,
Yeah,
okay, I thought it was.
okay, so similarly to site plan, the zoning already does have the concept of a minor subdivision and a major subdivision. However, what's different is that a minor subdivision would be, currently is approved by the DRB. So this would be changing it to be approved by the zoning administrator. And currently minor is 3 or fewer, I think. Is that right?
Mhm.
And he's changing it to 4 or fewer. And also does not involve the creation of a public street. So that's really, it's a tweak of the number and a change to who can do the review.
And this is in all districts.
Yes,
So if that's the case, Why can't we take site plan and put it in all the districts so we can put subdivision?
I think they're very different. A subdivision is, you're not necessarily building anything, that's a different thing. You're not necessarily dealing with circulation or landscaping or buffers or anything. All you're doing is taking one lot and dividing it up into 4 lots, literally in the deeds and in the plat.
Sure, but you're not generally doing that just for a hobby.
No, but then now I want to build a building and now I want to do something else. And then that's when the next level of review happens. What's the use? What's the structure? What's the traffic? What's the pedestrian access? All those other things get reviewed by all those other layers.
That's,
of review.
unfortunately, I'm gonna contradict you because part of the subdivision process is you need to look at general development standards,
Correct.
which is section 11, which deals with parking, which deals with circulations, which deals with street trees, which deals with lighting, which deals with outdoor storage, which deals
I
with,
know, but David's edits, I thought, was stripping those things
they don't,
because they're duplicative. And so he moved a lot of that. He took it out of subdivision and put it into
Right. but
site
you
plan.
still would
and
review
general
those
standards.
sections.
But what if I'm not doing anything? I'm just subdividing.
Then basically you could have a condition that says when you go to put in a road, you're gonna need to put in street trees or your lighting. You're gonna have to come back for that type of site plan review by the zoning administrator.
Well, then I misunderstood.
You don't get a
what
free
he
pass.
was
You,
Trying to, what
Yeah.
he was. If you go back to the presentation then, and you look at one of the slide that shows like the funnel and the cups or whatever, it's like the little picture about this one.
Yeah.
He basically said, currently it's all knotted up, what the process you're describing,
Mhm.
his edits. I don't think they're perfect, they're not precise, but a major driver was to eliminate that knotting up. But then allow them to be simultaneous. And he was trying, what he did is when there was duplication, like it's in site plan, it's in
Right.
subdivision, he took it out of subdivision and left it in site plan.
But you still, so site plan review is the use, right? So if you want to go ahead and create 4 lots, you
No,
go
it's
ahead.
not uses.
Site plan review deals with uses, permitted uses. Okay, if you have a permitted use, you go through site plan review and I look at parking, circulation, landscaping, lighting, things along those lines. So that being said, if you go ahead and you create 4 lots, right? You just go ahead and create 4 lots and you get it approved. We have an easement going through and that sort of stuff. And then Chris buys a lot. And then basically he wants to come in for a permit. So I will end up looking at site plan review criteria. Where's the road going? You know, are you having landscaping or things like that? Or if there's a condition on the approval that requires those things, then those things will have to be implemented. So it still gets that nature of review. If Chris decides he wants to put in an auto body shop that needs conditional use review, then basically he'll go to the DRB to have conditional use review to put it on that lot. So
Yes,
there's those
That's-
checks and balances. So
So I'm gonna go back to what I said before. If a developer or any owner of any parcel wants to subdivide into any denomination that's allowable, they can do that with no site plan review, and they can do that with no engineered plan, no wastewater plan, no plan of what they eventually
Right.
plan for those subdivided lots
yeah,
to include. But they would be pretty foolish, right? To pay all that money to tear up the paper into 4 equal parts. Their motivation is pretty mysterious if they have no intention.
yes,
And if they have an intention, then they are very likely, in order to protect their investment, the tens of thousands of dollars that they have spent on engineering to decide where those boundary lines are going to be to perform that subdivision. They are silly to not at the same time do a site review to protect that investment.
I
So
get that.
if I feel like if some idiot wants to subdivide and tear up their paper just as quickly as you just tore up your paper, go ahead.
You
Right.
do agree.
So our
Yeah.
standards.
But
our
no,
sta-
I agree that they don't overlap.
Right, they shouldn't overlap.
But so I agree, you don't need another review.
Right, so if you go back then to the slide you were on when we started talking about this, it was subdivision.
So we,
Because the criteria are quite simple,
Right.
because all those other considerations don't really affect subdivision review, they affect site plan review or use table review or zoning permit or conditional use or all those other things.
So,
So the difference that David is suggesting is 4 lots instead of 3, and that the zoning administrator can review a minor subdivision. And part of that is because he has stripped out a lot of the more,
Yeah, moved them out.
move them out of subdivision and put them in the other things. Does anybody have any objections to these changes that he suggested?
perfect.
Okay,
So the only difference between this and the discussion we had 10 minutes ago is the 10,000 square foot size building. That's the only difference.
Yeah.
Which doesn't even apply to the other districts anyway. So there's no point in, it should just be allowed everywhere in the previous discussion.
which should be allowed everywhere. Oh, the site plan review,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because it.
not
that's
make
just
it
what we're
district
saying.
specific.
We
Correct.
just agreed to it here. and
Correct.
So there's no, yeah, it doesn't need to be just in the village center because we've just said here, it doesn't have to be, it could be anywhere.
In village center, we have the square footage and
But that's the only difference, but the 10,000 feet doesn't really even apply anywhere else.
Well, the issue too is if you, currently in the village center, in the form-based code, you can have 0 lot line setback. So I could buy a lot of lots. And I could put one building on all the lots. You know, but I still need to meet the frontage, the architectural frontage requirements and design requirements, and that nature. But when it gets right down to it, you're still building one footprint, and that's allowed. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. You look at, row houses and wherever, you can pick good ones and bad ones.
Richmond or Bristol.
Yeah,
these
yeah,
towns,
yeah.
I mean,
Yeah, so.
Yeah, they're not exactly the same.
It's exactly the same, except for the sentence about the 10,000 square feet.
Because the review criteria are different.
Just a,
What you would dividing it up into the list, I see what you're saying is basically the same. But the things that you would review to approve a subdivision is like A, B, C, D, E. And the things that you review to do a site plan review are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And maybe there's
Sure, but
some
either way,
overlap.
Chris is the one reviewing it.
In the reality, so in like your description, the creation of the 4 lots, that's just strictly subdivision, okay? If I'm gonna develop those 4 lots, then all of a sudden it starts moving into this, the general design standards, which mirrors site plan with regards to streets or driveways or things along those lines. So when you start, the creation of lots is strictly subdivision, boom, that's it. So you can go ahead and create your 4 lots and just sit on them.
Right.
But once you basically do a subdivision, you start proposing access and driveways
Right.
and things along those lines,
Right.
then all of a sudden you start meeting the general, what's section 11, the general
Right.
development standards, and whatever it's going to be called or moved into, those come into play. So traditionally, when you have a subdivision review, there's a future development, so all those things sort of get covered.
Right. So that's why David thought this one, I mean, I'm putting words in his mind, but this one could be town-wide because it's basically very straightforward. Whereas site plan review would be in the village center only. Because 1, that's our focus. 2, that's where we really want to facilitate development, make it faster, easier, cheaper. And 3, because that's where you have, the site plan review criteria is where you have more, not arbitrary, but more impact of the daily life of the experience. If somebody subdivides their property, it doesn't affect the community at all, but if somebody starts to develop, so I actually think, Chris, it's not really involves the creation of 4 or fewer lots, it involves the development of 4 or fewer lots.
Site plan review.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
a big difference.
Yeah, I mean, so basically, you still gotta go through subdivision review. Maybe the word is wrong, but the reality is this right here
Well,
in the village center district. And wherever that district may be or whatever it becomes, then I can review
right,
structures under
right,
site plan review
right.
that are under 10,000 square
But
feet.
the word really matters to me, creation versus development, because the subdivision might have happened 5 years ago.
Yes.
It's really,
Mhm.
and the development comes in now, that should really
Right.
should be the trigger. Is the development of 4 or fewer.
We'll just get
lots.
rid of creation, and that involves 4 or fewer lots.
Well, I think it involves the development.
But if
That's what it
Well,
is.
you want to get it when they create the lots, not just when they develop the lots.
But isn't
No,
that,
they're
that's
different.
I know they're different.
It's just subdivision, you just tear the paper and.
Right, okay, we're in circles. Yes.
I can create a lot with the zoning board approval, zoning administrator approval, done. Now, 5 years later, I want to start building on it,
Developing.
Right,
developing it. It
Yeah.
still goes under the minor subdivision.
Now,
no,
the
the
subdivision-
subdivision's already created.
The subdivision created, yeah. And so what ends up happening is we start looking at the uses that are gonna go on that approved lot. So,
Pour up my paper that has
Yeah.
my notes on it.
I know, I watched you do it, and I was like, oh, you're gonna regret that later.
perfect, this will be,
This is too simple.
I know, all right, so.
so,
It's for the building.
well, regardless of
We're gonna get them anyway.
permitted uses I approve townwide, and those always fall under site plan review, so maybe that's already taken care of, and we don't need to, worry about that
Right,
being townwide,
right.
so.
Looking over onto major subdivision and the and or there. When was the last time you did one of these that created a public street, as in something deeded over to the town as opposed to a street that anybody can drive?
Never.
over if they want to?
Never in my 9 years here have we,
So if it creates 5 more lots and involves, it goes through there. If it creates 5 or more lots and does not involve,
Or.
that doesn't.
so maybe so currently the verbiage basically is if you create, more than 4 lots, it needs to be on basically what's considered, would be a public street. It needs to be built to the public works spec for a public street. And so,
But it's not a public street.
it's not a public street,
This is a public street.
right? So if you build a private
Just
street,
say or.
Yeah, it should just say or,
Yeah.
but they're not.
It says and or.
And or.
That's why it says and or, it says you can have one or you can have both.
Right,
So you have to have at least one and you're allowed to have both, but either way, you gotta make it right.
okay. So those were the high level. So I think that was helpful because the red line flows from that. Whereas to me, the red line was a little premature because we hadn't really hashed it through.
I see a hand, but I can't. see whose hand.
Heidi.
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure there was, that there wasn't any question about why we have now chosen creation of 4, that the cutoff line is 4. I just wanted to just see if that was, again, if we're moving towards our being defensible, right? What is the rationale by 4 as opposed to making it 5? It's currently 3, if I understand.
Right. I think we asked him that and he said he was just wanting to move the needle incrementally. And also I think it may be related to the public works specs about driveways and roads.
well, those are 3 right now, so they need to be amended or changed. I think, the biggest change, here, Heidi, is that you're allowing the zoning administrator to approve lots. So, at what level do you want the zoning administrator to stop? And I think that number is 4, that they said, and I think that's, I think that, that's fine. Another proposal that they have in there is that all boundary line adjustments are administratively approvable, and I think that's fine. Right now, a boundary line adjustment involves moving a line where if I have 4 acres and Chris has 2 acres and he wants an acre, I move my line an acre, we both have 3. Currently, if you're in a zone district, I can administratively approve up to what that zone district is. So if you're in the 3 acre district, I can approve up to 3 acres. If not, it goes to the DRB. Sometimes it seems a little silly that I can approve 2.99, but I can't approve 3.
Right. What about if the boundary line adjustment would create a non-conforming lot?
I can't approve it.
Can't prove it, okay.
So
Okay.
The
can't approve.
suggestion is that if it does that, it's allowed as long as the existing pieces are.
You can have a non-conforming lot and add to it, create a conforming lot, but you can't,
Create the
You can't create a non-conforming lot, okay?
you don't increase non-conformity.
Could.
What's that?
No,
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 still
yeah,
not.
yeah.
no, it's just saying he could do it, he can approve a boundary line adjustment without going.
Right. Okay, so in light of this discussion and in light of the fact that we are wanting to still move forward. I'm wondering, like, does everybody want to go back through the red lines and adjust your comments or make additional comments to Chris? Or are all the comments that Chris has received so far, all of our comments about the first chunk that we received?
And Heidi, or excuse me, when you say the first chunk,
Mhm.
that's all the documents or just the process document?
All the documents that we received so far, which was permit review procedures, site plan subdivision,
General
and
development.
architectural standards.
Are we gonna go over our comments on the red lines? or-
Yeah, so, well, that's what I was looking at the time, is if we want to take another, 15 minutes.
I don't think we have enough time to go through in 15 minutes. No.
So,
So you've seen how I sort of respond to comments that have been posed to me, whether it's helpful or not, I don't know. But if you're inclined to go back through the red line stuff and sort of, if you have questions on specific ones or you have issues with certain ones, I guess you can respond to everybody so we can look or we can narrow it down. If you don't have any questions or concerns, then don't say anything. We'll just assume that those sections are set and fine, which would be, one way to do it.
I think what we're looking for, though, is we all want to talk to each other about it. Not necessarily just like, me at home in my
Oh, all right.
den trying to figure out
Well,
what this or that means.
we've got a meeting going on, so
Right, so, am I reading that right? So we could see what we can get done in another 15 minutes through it. Or we can decide, do we need to have another meeting? And to take more time to go through it,
Just 15 minutes for all documents?
just to start at the one, we were not gonna get through them all,
Yeah.
because there's 4 of
Right.
them.
we can get through them in 12 minutes.
Pardon?
We can get through them in 12 minutes.
If we, maybe we can make some progress on them if we focus on the ones that you are most interested to discuss with planning commission people as opposed to smaller issues that David just can respond to.
So the commissioners know that basically what we're looking at is trying to do another work session on these 4 for either September 10th or the 12th. Originally, we were looking at the 12th. David can't make that meeting, so he's going to be at the next planning commission meeting, which is the 17th of September, to make a presentation on the second bunch of changes. He anticipates getting the second tranche, or whatever we want to call it, distributed by the beginning of the month. So that's, after next week.
So the first September meeting would be another meeting on this, what we just talked about.
Yeah, the intent would be another work session.
Okay, the other option he had given, I looked back at old notes, was that we could do it on the 10th. David was available between 5 and 7 p.m. because there was a conflict with the Affordable Housing Committee. And I asked like, well, couldn't you do it earlier? And he said, yes.
All right, yeah, that is,
So the tenth feels like a long time away to me.
So just as a programming note, anything on the tenth is gonna be really problematic for me.
I'll be on an airplane.
Yeah,
I'll be coming back on an airplane.
tenth is hard for me, but
Okay, so maybe the tenth isn't gonna work then. So if we wait until the tenth, then we basically have that's our last opportunity before we have to go to the next chunk.
yeah, well, the next shot's gonna be, yeah,
And
so,
that'll be presented to us on the 17th.
right, so the idea or the intent would be is, between the tenth and the 17th, final comments on the 4 red lines would be provided to David.
The ones that we just received. That we
The ones,
just
yeah,
talked
yeah,
about,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah. So they would provide it. He would make the presentation on the next group on the 17th. We'd have a few work sessions on those, be able to, do the same thing. And I believe there'd be a final presentation of everything. And then we'd roll it out for, public hearing.
Mhm.
So.
Okay, so the 10th isn't gonna work, and the other date you said had
Was
was
the
the
12th.
12th.
Yeah, because the 11th, the DRB is meeting.
Okay, so I can't make it on the 12th. But do we have a quorum otherwise?
We did at one point. So
I could be on the 12th. And what about the 3rd?
the 3rd, I'm away. 3rd, I'm away, David's away. So the idea was basically is, if you meet on the 3rd, you're free ranging it. So,
I won't be on the 30th.
We have free ranged it before.
The 3rd is our regular meeting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
yeah.
Mhm.
And the idea or the intent was basically,
After
yeah, the idea was to move it so I could be present.
Well, it's been super helpful to have you here tonight. Having said that, I think we could probably go through a lot of these red lines without your presence. But I don't mean to exclude you. I'm not excluding you. I'm just saying that I think we could.
I'm not calling in from the Cape, so.
No, no,
Not
no,
participating.
no, I'm not, I wouldn't ask you to. I'm just,
I mean, I would be willing to do that also because 1, I can't be here on the 12th, and 2, that feels like a long time away. Like we kind of have momentum, and I don't want to get backed into a
That's-
corner. And I'd like to meet the schedule and not have to delay.
Right.
I
guess my only advice, if you're going to do that, and you're gonna start drilling down into verbiage or regulations, keep it simple.
Yeah,
Don't wordsmith it. Don't get
Yeah.
really hung up on lots of, complicated words. You want something very simple. Developers like green lights or red lights.
yeah. I don't think we would be wordsmithing. It would be more like this, like conceptually, what are our concerns? Do
Right.
we agree with the direction? We're paying David to do the words.
I think also too, we may end up having we may end up having the draft of the use table I can see. And so when you're drilling into that sort of stuff, if you look at permitted uses, then you're gonna sort of say, okay, I'm comfortable with that, I'm comfortable with the zoning administrator doing that, or whatever it may be. You have an idea or concept of what is site plan review and that nature. Conditional use review is basically you look at the use and how it impacts or adversely impacts the surrounding neighborhood, the surrounding environs. And the DRB can approve it, or the DRB can basically put on restrictions, and those are hours of use, things along those lines. If you're operating an auto body shop, and it's a conditional use, well, they may not let you open on Sundays, or you got to close at a certain time, or you got to, whatever it may be. Landscape facility, okay, well, you got to have dust control, you got to have all these other types of things because it could impact. And those would be conditions of any sort of approval. So that's a conditional use. So when you see a use and it's a conditional use, or you see a use that you want to make sure that it doesn't go too big, then you say over this square footage, it's a conditional use, and then it will have a higher level of review, and it has more checks and balances. So the operation doesn't have an adverse impact. That's the intent of a conditional use.
Okay, so so you can't come on the 3rd? Would we have a quorum on the 3rd? Heidi and Sabina, would you be able to, that is our regular scheduled meeting. So
I can come on the 3rd.
Okay. I can come on the third.
I'm going for.
Yes.
I can go on the third.
Okay, does anybody object to going forward, free ranging it? I like that. Okay, so we'll hold our meeting on the third, and the plan will be to continue to plow through the red line, or to plow through the red line, given the conversation we had. And I would say, as much as you can do in advance of having your notes, like 11.3.2, here's my question, that will make it faster.
And if you have, between now and the third, well, now and the 28th, if you have questions on that you want some clarity, then you can send me, ideally, Word works very easy, but I was able to figure out the Excel thing.
Yeah.
I live by paper. I'm not a real techno person.
I do have a question, Chris, on some of my comments. You were like, leave it as is. And I didn't know if you meant leave it as David had suggested, or leave it as it currently is now in the regulations. So when you say leave it as is, I just wasn't sure.
I think some of them were the same, but
Yeah.
but I also looked at David's and
Okay.
but I
Okay,
mean-
so are we gonna close this topic for now? That was my agenda that I ripped up. I see your hand, Mr. Lacy, but I'm looking at my agenda. It's quite funny. So I think we're gonna close the topic now. We're gonna continue this discussion. So we're not closing the topic. We're stopping it for now. We're gonna continue it at our next meeting. Comment on what we just discussed briefly, please.
I hope you are meeting with Underhill at some point before the hearing, just as a courtesy and as a general working together thing.
Okay, great. Thank you for that reminder. Okay, the next topic is events. Does anybody have any updates? Davina, you went to a conference.
I did. I went to the Leadership Development Conference and attended some interesting sessions. One of the sessions I attended was with Susan Clark, and I suggested to the group that's doing the town meeting revisions that we might want to invite her as a leading expert in public democracy, to come and be the facilitator for the kickoff meeting, because I think she would be a great asset to making sure that we that meeting yields the results that we're looking for. So I know they met yesterday evening. I couldn't attend, but I did mention to Gay that I was putting that idea forward. I also attended a session with updates on Act 250, and I forwarded a summary sheet to Susan. Maybe we can put that in the shared drive, Susan, so that we're obviously not going to have time to go through it at this meeting, but it would be good for people to see, because some interesting things that came out of that were just things that are happening at the regional planning level that would potentially impact our decision making. And so I think it would, maybe if we post that on the shared drive, we can put that on an agenda item for a future meeting and sort of hash that out, what the implications are.
Yeah, that's a good idea. Even on our page on the website.
Or that would be great too. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, any other updates? Who's available to be at our table at the farmer's market on August 29th?
I think I can come, Susan. I just don't know if I can stay till the end, but I
can join you, Sabina. And the 29th, I could stay till the end. That's next week.
Yeah, okay, and I can go probably for most of the time also. So, I'll do the setup. And then, I had originally asked Linda if she would be able to print some materials for us, and I've talked with Chris a little bit about ideas for materials. So does anybody want to work with me mostly through email between now and then to figure out like what to display or what to have as a handout at the table? And I was kind of thinking maybe some sort of summary of David's slides over the last couple of presentations.
Sure, I can help you do that.
You can to try to just make people aware of the kinds of changes we're thinking about.
Sure.
Okay, thank you. All right, any other business? Oh, okay, so then our next meeting, so we'll meet on the 3rd. Then can we make a definitive decision about the 12th? And then the 17th, so we would have 3 meetings in September.
Yeah, so on the 17th, David's gonna be presenting to you. And so we anticipate the second batch of material will be provided at the beginning of the month. I'll see if I can get get release of the use table maybe at the end of this week. So you can start going back and forth, on that. My understanding is the use table is going to be townwide. I'm pretty sure, not just exclusive of the village center.
Yeah. And the 12th, you can run the meeting and make sure we have the room and make sure we have TV and Nancy and everything. Because that's not a normal night for us.
Right. So I can follow up with Nancy. I've got the room for the 12th. Aaron, you gotta book the 12th. And I think that should be fine if you decide. I mean, if you decide you want it. If you decide you don't, then that's fine as well. The 17th,
I would say let's assume we're gonna have it unless the 3rd is wildly smooth and productive and we decide we don't need it.
okay.
So, sorry,
Anything?
you're saying on the 12th, 5 to 7?
No, you were saying
That was on the 10th,
On the 10th.
because there was a conflict with the affordable housing with the room.
Okay.
Yeah, the 12th would be regular time, 7 to 9.
right. So you're gonna meet on the 3rd. You want to?
Run that meeting, so I won't be here.
So what I'll do is, I'm gonna take the existing agenda, I'm gonna throw together a draft agenda for the 3rd and just send it to you guys, and you can push or pull it as need be. We'll do the same thing for the 12th.
Okay, are you able to post it for us though?
Yeah, I
The
mean,
physical?
yeah.
Okay.
And we'll get those two taken care of.
Cramming lots of meetings so we can get Sarah's brain as much as possible.
I don't know, I'll just be back from being on the road.
Yeah.
I don't know much my brain.
Yeah,
I'll do my best.
Can you please clarify when we're gonna get the draft table of uses?
I will have to, but I can't right now.
Okay.
But it sounded like we would get it soon.
I talked with David today, says he's been working on it. He feels he's got it virtually taken care of. He's ready to release it soon. So what's soon in David's world or your world? I don't know, but I can all ask.
To start discussing that on the 3rd,
No.
on the 12th.
He's gonna.
No, I did it on the 17th.
Oh,
It would just be good for us to have in our back pocket as we're thinking about these things, because we discovered the
Yes.
relationships.
Yes.
But more as like a frame of reference rather than like really like hammer through it. Maybe that's unrealistic, it's impossible.
There are gonna be a huge amount of uses that are gonna be, you're gonna be like, well, this is never gonna get built here. But it may,
Yeah.
so just, don't get stuck on the use. What you wanna look at for the use is it a permitted use or is it a conditional use?
Mhm,
And you wanna look at where it is in that zone district.
mhm.
And you wanna sort of say, okay, well, I really do not wanna have something this big in that district that can be administratively approved. I want it to have a review. And
Right,
so you change it from a P to a C.
right. So the 3rd and the 10th are basically the red line of all the documents that we have currently now.
Well,
The 3rd and the 12th, yes. Oh, my God. Okay, we better stop talking about this now. It's getting too confusing. All right, so, I'd like to make a motion to go into executive session in order to discuss matters of personnel.
I would like to second your motion.
All those in favor?
Uh,
Aye.
So Aaron, you need to bow out, and Sabina, you need to stop recording.
Yes.
All right, goodbye, have a good night.